The varieties of religious experience, a study in human nature, being the Gifford Lectures on Natural Religion delivered at Edinburgh in 1901 to 1902. The Varieties of Religious Experience, a study in human nature, is a book by Harvard University psychologist and philosopher William James. It comprises his edited Gifford Lectures on Natural Theology, which were delivered at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, between 1901 and 1902. The lectures concerned the psychological study of individual private religious experiences and mysticism, and used a range of examples to identify commonalities in religious experiences across traditions. Soon after its publication, Varieties entered the Western canon of psychology and philosophy and has remained in print for over a century. James later developed his philosophy of pragmatism. There are many overlapping ideas in Varieties and his 1907 book Pragmatism. Historical context, psychology of religion. In the 1890s, a new psychology emerged in European and American universities, which coincided with the establishment of many new psychology laboratories and the appointment of faculty in psychology. New psychology's novelty was encapsulated by its distinction from philosophy of mind in particular, and theology, and its emphasis on a laboratory-based experimental method. As part of this development, the psychology of religion emerged as a new approach to studying religious experience, with the U.S. being the major center of research in this field. A few years earlier, Edwin Diller Starbuck had written a book entitled Psychology of Religion, which James had written a preface to. James thanked Starbuck in the preface to his book for having made over to me his large collection of manuscript material, before then citing Starbuck's work throughout the Varieties. Starbuck recollects that James looked through several hundred of his documents. The Varieties was first presented in 1901-2 as a set of 20 Gifford Lectures at the University of Edinburgh. This was a lecture series instituted by Adam Gifford and intended to have a popular and public audience on the subject of natural theology or scientific approaches to the study of religion. James had originally planned for the second half of his lectures to be a philosophical assessment of religion, but ill health meant that he could only write one lecture on the topic, resulting in a work more descriptive than James had initially anticipated. Themes: religious experiences. In the Varieties, James explicitly excludes from his study both theology and religious institutions, choosing to limit his study to direct and immediate religious experiences, which he regarded as the more interesting object of study. Churches, theologies, and institutions are important as vehicles for passing on insights gained by religious experience, but in James's view, they live secondhand off the original experience of the founder. A key distinction in James's treatment of religion is between that of healthy-minded religion and religion of a sick soul. The former is a religion of life's goodness, while the latter cannot overcome the sense of evil in the world. Although James presents this as a value-neutral distinction between different kinds of religious attitudes, he, in fact, regarded the sick-souled religious experience as preferable, and his anonymous source of melancholy experience in lectures 6 and 7 is, in fact, autobiographical. Following these autobiographical sections, James transitions into 2 lectures, 9 and X, examining religious conversion from a psychological point of view, along with its importance in religious history. James considered healthy-mindedness to be America's main contribution to religion, which he saw running from the transcendentalists Ralph Waldo Emerson and Walt Whitman to Mary Baker, Eddy's Christian Science. At the extreme, the healthy-minded see sickness and evil as an illusion. James considered belief in the mind cure to be reasonable when compared to medicine as practiced at the beginning of the 20th century. James devotes 2 lectures to mysticism, and in the lectures, he outlines 4 markers common to mystical experiences. These are ineffability. The experience is incapable of being described and must be directly experienced to be understood. Noesis. The experience is understood to be a state of knowledge through which divine truths can be learned. Transience. The experience is of limited duration. Passivity. The subject of the experience is passive, unable to control the arrival and departure of the experience. He believed that religious experiences can have morbid origins in brain pathology and can be irrational, but nevertheless largely positive. Unlike the bad ideas that people have under the influence of, say, fevers or drunkenness, after a religious experience, the ideas and insights usually still make sense to the person and are often valued for the rest of the person's life. James had relatively little interest in the legitimacy or illegitimacy of religious experiences. Further, despite James' examples being almost exclusively drawn from Christianity, he did not mean to limit his ideas to any single religion. Religious experiences are something that people sometimes have under certain conditions. In James' description, these experiences are inherently very complex, often life-altering and largely indescribable and unquantifiable through traditional means, yet measurable in the profound changes they have on the individuals that report such experiences. Pragmatism. Ultimately, James made a pragmatic argument for religion, writing that the uses of religion, its uses to the individual who has it, and the uses of the individual himself to the world are the best arguments that truth is in it. As an example of this, he gives the therapeutic effects of prayer. Although James did not fully articulate his pragmatic philosophy until the publication of Pragmatism in 1907, the approach to religious belief in the varieties is influenced by pragmatic philosophy. In his Philosophy and Conclusions lectures, James concludes that religion is overall beneficial to humankind, although acknowledges that this does not establish its truth. While James intended to approach the topic of religious experience from this pragmatist angle, Richard Rorty argues that he ultimately deviated from this methodology in the varieties. In his lectures on saintliness, the intention is to discover whether the saintly virtues are beneficial for human life. If they are, then, according to pragmatism, that supports their claim to truth. However, James ends up concluding that the value of the saintly virtues is dependent on their origin, given that the saintly virtues are only beneficial if there is an afterlife for which they can prepare us. Their value depends on whether they are divinely ordained or the result of human psychology. This is no longer a question of value, but of empirical fact. Hence, Rorty argues that James ends up abandoning his own pragmatist philosophy due to his ultimate reliance of empirical evidence. James remarked on the aesthetic motivation in an individual choosing a religion and praised religion for its aesthetic value. He said that individuals involuntarily intellectualize their religious experience and that metaphysical stipulations about the attributes of a deity enriches our bare piety to carry these exalted, mysterious verbal additions, just as it enriches a church to have an organ and old brasses, marbles and frescoes, and stained windows. James considers the possibility of overbeliefs, beliefs which are not strictly justified by reason valid universally, but which might understandably be held by educated people nonetheless. They are buildings out performed by the intellect into directions of which feeling originally supplied the hint. Philosophy may contribute to shaping these overbeliefs. For example, traditional arguments for the existence of God, including the cosmological, design, and moral arguments, along with the argument from popular consensus. Although James did not himself endorse any of these arguments, the fact is that these arguments do but follow the combined suggestions of the facts and of our feeling. They prove nothing rigorously. They only corroborate our pre-existent partialities. He says that individuals in the past had sought such universal proofs, asking what more ideal refuge could there be than such a system would offer to spirits vexed by the muddiness and accidentality of the world of sensible things. James says he has his own overbelief, which he does not intend to prove, that there's a greater reality not normally accessible by our normal ways of relating to the world, but which religious experiences can connect us to. Reception and legacy. The August 1902 New York Times review of the first edition ends with the following. Everywhere, there is a frolic welcome to the eccentricities and extravagances of the religious life. Many will question whether its more sober exhibitions would not have been more fruitful of results. But the interest and fascination of the treatment are beyond dispute. And so, too, is the sympathy to which nothing human is indifferent. A July 1963 Time magazine review of an expanded edition published that year ends with quotes about the book from Pierce and Santayana. He was simply impatient with his fellow academicians and their endless hair splitting over matters that had no relation to life. A vibrant, generous person, he hoped to show that religious emotions, even those of the deranged, were crucial to human life. The great virtue of the varieties, noted pragmatist philosopher Charles Peirce, is its penetration into the hearts of people. Its great weakness, retorted George Santayana, is its tendency to disintegrate the idea of truth, to recommend belief without reason, and to encourage superstition. In 1913, Josiah Royce wrote a paper on George Fox, which he described as a fragmentary contribution to that study of the varieties of religious experience, which William James has so significantly brought to the attention of students of human nature. Royce described James' book as one which, with all its wealth of illustration and in its courageous enterprise, has a certain classic beauty. He further considered the book to be reflective of the manifoldness and of the breadth of the general psychological movement itself. In 1986, Nicholas Lash criticized James's varieties, challenging James's separation of the personal and institutional. Lash argues that religious geniuses, such as St. Paul or Jesus, with whom James was particularly interested, did not have their religious experiences in isolation, but within and influenced by a social and historical context. Ultimately, Lash argues that this comes from James's failure to overcome Cartesian dualism in his thought. While James believed he had succeeded in surpassing Descartes, he was still tied to a notion of an internal ego, distinct from the body or outside world, which undergoes experiences. The book was cherished by Ludwig Wittgenstein, who wrote to Bertrand Russell that, "Whenever I have time now, I read James' Varieties of Religious Experience. This book does me a lot of good. It was one of the few books he recommended to his friend Maurice O'Connor Drury." The influence of James' book is seen from letters sent to him from his sister Hermione as he was serving at the front during World War I. She was concerned about his well-being and wrote to him that there will be time for you to be a Jamesian type after the war is over. Brian McGinnis writes that Wittgenstein aspired to be the saintly type described in the book. In more recent years, the book has continued to be positively reviewed. In 1951, William A. Christian called the book still one of the best books on the psychological variables in the domain of religion. And in 1995, Stephen H. Webb remarked that James is perhaps most read today for his sensitive descriptions of the bewildering diversity of religious forms. Cosmic Consciousness, a study in the evolution of the human mind, is a 1901 book by the psychiatrist Richard Maurice Buck, in which the author explores the concept of cosmic consciousness, which he defines as a higher form of consciousness than that possessed by the ordinary man. Synopsis. In Cosmic Consciousness, Buck stated that he discerned three forms or degrees of consciousness. Simple consciousness possessed by both animals and mankind. Self-consciousness possessed by mankind, encompassing thought, reason, and imagination, and cosmic consciousness, which is a higher form of consciousness than that possessed by the ordinary man. According to Buck, this consciousness shows the cosmos to consist not of dead matter governed by unconscious, rigid, and unintending law. It shows it, on the contrary, as entirely immaterial, entirely spiritual, and entirely alive. It shows that death is an absurdity, that everyone and everything has eternal life. It shows that the universe is God, and that God is the universe, and that no evil ever did or ever will enter into it. A great deal of this is, of course, from the point of view of self. consciousness absurd, it is nevertheless undoubtedly true. Reception. Moore said that Buck's cosmic consciousness is an interconnected way of seeing things, which is more of an intuitive knowing than it is a factual understanding. Moore's pointed out that, for scholars of the purist camp, the experience of cosmic consciousness is incomplete without the element of love, which is the foundation of mystical consciousness. 1a. Herrero Brazos said that Buck's cosmic consciousness refers to the evolution of the intellect and not to the ineffable revelation of hidden truths. According to Brazos, it was William James who equated Buck's cosmic consciousness with mystical experience or mystical consciousness. Gary Lockman notes that today Buck's experience would most likely be explained by the God spot, or more generally as a case of temporal lobe epilepsy. But he is skeptical of these and other organic explanations. Similar concepts. According to Michael Robertson, cosmic consciousness and William James's 1902 book The Varieties of Religious Experience have much in common. Both Buck and James argue that all religions, no matter how seemingly different, have a common core. Both believe that it is possible to identify this core by stripping away institutional accretions of dogma and ritual and focusing on individual experience. And both identify mystical illumination as the foundation of all religious experience. James popularized the concept of religious experience, which he explored in his 1902 book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. He saw mysticism as a distinctive experience which supplies knowledge of the transcendental. He considered the personal religion to be more fundamental than either theology or ecclesiasticism. Spiritual evolution, also called higher evolution, is the idea that the mind or spirit, in analogy to biological evolution, collectively evolves from a simple form dominated by nature to a higher form dominated by the spiritual or divine. It is differentiated from the lower or biological evolution. Evolution, Western esotericism. Theories of spiritual evolution are important in many occult and esoteric teachings, which emphasize the progression and development of the individual either after death, spiritualism, or through successive reincarnations. Theosophy, Hermeticism. The Great Chain of Being. The concept of the Great Chain of Being was developed by Plato and Aristotle, whose ideas were taken up and synthesized by Plotinus. Plotinus in turn heavily influenced Augustine's theology, and from there Aquinas and the scholastics. The Great Chain of Being was an important theme in Renaissance and Elizabethan thought, had an under-acknowledged influence on the shaping of the ideas of the Age of Enlightenment, and played a large part in the worldview of 18th century Europe. And while essentially a static worldview, by the 18th and early 19th century, it had been temporalized by the concept of the soul ascending or progressing spiritually through the successive rungs or stages, and thus growing or evolving closer to God. It also had at this time an impact on theories of biological evolution. E.F. Schumacher, author of Small is Beautiful, has recently proposed a sort of simplified great chain of being based on the idea of four kingdoms: mineral, vegetable, animal, human. Schumacher rejects modernist and scientific themes, his approach recalling the universalist orientation of writers like Huston Smith and likely contributing to Ken Wilber's holonomic hierarchy or great nest of being. Spiritualism. Spiritualists reacted with uncertainty to the theories of evolution in the late 19th and early 20th century. Broadly speaking, the concept of evolution fit the spiritualist thought of the progressive development of humanity. At the same time, however, a belief in the animal origins of man threatened the foundation of the immortality of the spirit. For if man had not been created, it was scarcely plausible that he would be specially endowed with a spirit. This led to spiritualists embracing spiritual evolution. In the 19th century, Anglo-American spiritualist ideas emphasized the progression of the soul after death to higher states of existence, in contrast to Spiritism, which admits to reincarnation. Spiritualism taught that after death, spirits progressed to new spheres of existence. According to this idea, evolution occurred in the spirit world at a rate more rapid and under conditions more favorable to growth than encountered on Earth. The biologist and spiritualist Alfred Russel Wallace, 1823 to 1913, believed that qualitative novelties could arise through the process of spiritual evolution, in particular, the phenomena of life and mind. Wallace attributed these novelties to a supernatural agency. Later in his life, Wallace was an advocate of spiritualism and believed in an immaterial origin for the higher mental faculties of humans. He believed that evolution suggested the universe had a purpose and that certain aspects of living organisms are not explainable in terms of purely materialistic processes. In a 1909 magazine article entitled The World of Life, which he later expanded into a book of the same name, Wallace argued in his 1911 book World of Life for a spiritual approach to evolution and described evolution as creative power, directive mind, and ultimate purpose. Wallace believed natural selection could not explain intelligence or morality in a human being, so suggested that non-material spiritual forces accounted for these. Wallace believed the spiritual nature of man could not have come about by natural selection alone. The origins of the spiritual nature must originate in the unseen universe of spirit. Robert Broom, in his book The Coming of Man, Was It Accident or Design? 1933, claimed that spiritual agencies had guided evolution as animals and plants were too complex to have arisen by chance. According to Broom, there were at least two different kinds of spiritual forces, and psychics are capable of seeing them. Broom claimed there was a plan and purpose in evolution, and that the origin of Homo sapiens is the ultimate purpose behind evolution. According to Broom, much of evolution looks as if it had been planned to result in man, and in other animals and plants to make the world a suitable place for him to dwell in. The Anglo-American position recalls, and is presumably inspired by, 18th century concepts regarding the temporalization of the great chain of being. Spiritual evolution, rather than being a physical or physico-spiritual process, is based on the idea of realms or stages through which the soul or spirit passes in a non-temporal, qualitative way. This is still an important part of some spiritualist ideas today, and is similar to some mainline, as opposed to fundamentalist Protestant Christian beliefs, according to which after death the person goes to Summerland. Theosophical conceptions. Theosophy presents a more sophisticated and complex cosmology than spiritualism, although coming out of the same general milieu. H. P. Blavatsky developed a highly original cosmology, according to which the human race, both collectively and through the succession of individual reincarnation and spiritual evolution, passes through a number of root races, beginning with the huge, ethereal, and mindless Polarian or first root race, through the Lemurian third, Atlantean fourth, and our present Aryan fifth race. This will give rise to a future, post-Aryan sixth root race of highly spiritual and enlightened beings that will arise in Baja California in the 28th century, and an even more sublime seventh root race, before ascending to totally superhuman and cosmic states of existence. Blavatsky's ideas were further developed by her successors, such as C.W. Leadbeater, Rudolf Steiner, Alice Bailey, Benjamin Creme, and Victor Schumann, each of whom went into huge detail in constructing Baroque cycles of rounds, races, and subraces. Schumann elaborated on the theosophical conceptions of spiritual evolution and proposed, 1990, a classification of Homo spiritualis, Latin, spiritual man, the sixth root race, consisting of 8 subraces: HS0 Anabiosis spiritualis, HS1 Scientella spiritualis, HS2 Aurora spiritualis, HS3 Ascensus spiritualis, HS4 Vocatus spiritualis, HS5 Illuminatio spiritualis, on S6 Creatio spiritualis, and HS7 Servitus spiritualis. According to Schumann, Anabiosis spiritualis is spirituality in the potential of unmanifest accumulations of personality, the charge of the fires of spiritual creation. Scientella spiritualis is the cordial presentiment of the presence and demands of the spirit, spiritualization of the fire of centers, glimpses of self-consciousness of a spiritual person. Aurora spiritualis is the imperative of the spirit, the action of the spiritual fire of the centers in the heart, the kindling of the fire of the spirit, the formation of the orientation of the personality to the spiritual improvement of life. Ascensus spiritualis is the dawn of spiritual aspirations, the action of the fire of the spirit in the heart, searching spiritual work, aspiration of self-consciousness to merge with the one spirit. Vocatus spiritualis is the maturation of spiritual accumulations, the purposeful spiritual creation, self-awareness and realization of a person as a warrior of the spirit. Illuminatio spiritualis is the beginning of the fiery transmutation, the lighting of the achievement fire, revealing the identity of man, the earthly carrier of the thoughts of the one spirit. Creatio spiritualis is the beginning of fiery creation, the action of the fire of achievement in the heart, the revealing self-consciousness of man as the earthly carrier of the light of the one spirit. Servitus spiritualis is the carrying a consciously accepted duty commission, the synthesis of spirituality in the clarity of knowledge of a fiery man. Although including elements of the science of her day, as well as both Eastern and Western esoteric thought, Blavatsky rejected the Darwinian idea that man evolved from apes, and most subsequent esotericists followed this lead. Darwinism, with its explanation of evolution through material factors like natural selection and random mutation, does not sit well with many spiritual evolutionists, for whom evolution is initiated or guided by metaphysical principles or is tending towards a final spiritual or divine state. It is believed by theosophists that humans are evolving spiritually through a series of esoteric initiations, and in the future humans will become esoteric masters themselves as their souls gradually rise upward through the spiritual hierarchy over the course of eons as they reincarnate. Despite this, recent theosophists and anthroposophists have tried to incorporate the facts of geology and paleontology into their cosmology and spiritual evolution. In anthroposophy, Hermann Poppelbaum is a particularly creative thinker in this regard. Some have attempted to equate Lemuria with Gondwanaland, for example. Today, all these ideas have little influence outside their specialized followings, but for a time, theosophical concepts were immensely influential. Theosophy-like teachings also continue today in a group of religions based on theosophy called the Ascended Master Teachings. Rosicrucians, which view the world as a training school, which posits that while mistakes are made in life, humans often learn more from mistakes than successes. Suffering is considered as merely the result of error, and the impact of suffering on the consciousness causes humans to be active along other lines which are found to be good, in harmony with nature. Humans are seen as spirits attending the school of life for the purpose of unfolding latent spiritual power, developing themselves from impotence to omnipotence, related also to development from innocence into virtue, reaching the stage of creative gods at the end of mankind's present evolution, great day of manifestation. In esoteric spirituality epigenesis, it is the idea that since the mind was given to the human being, it is the original creative impulse which has been the cause of all of mankind's development. According to this approach, humans build upon that which has already been created, but add new elements because of the activity of the spirit. Humans have the capacity, therefore, to become creative intelligence's creators. For a human to fulfill this promise, his training should allow for the exercise of originality, which distinguishes creation from imitation. When epigenesis becomes inactive in the individual or even in a race, evolution ceases and degeneration commences. Neo-Vedanta, according to Gosling, Swami Vivekananda based most of his cosmological and biological ideas on Samkhya. Influenced by Western thought and esotericism, Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo developed a view on reincarnation in which an involution off the divine into matter takes place, and the person has to evolve over multiple lives until the divine gains recognition of its true nature and liberation is attained. Samkhya is one of the 6 systems of Hindu philosophy. Proto-Samkhya ideas can be found in the Upanishads, Jainism, and Buddhism. Samkhya posits 2 ontological entities, Purusha, witness consciousness, and Prakriti, nature, which includes mind, cognition, and the perceived objects. According to Samkhya, when Purusha comes into proximity with Prakriti, it disturbs the equilibrium of Prakriti. As a result, a number of successive essences called tattvas evolve from Prakriti. The most subtle tattvas emerge first, then progressively grosser ones, each in a particular order, and finally the elements and the organs of sense. Adherents of Samkhya Yoga adhere to the release of Purusha from Prakriti and the return of Prakriti to the unmanifest condition. Sri Aurobindo and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin both describe a progression from inanimate matter to a future state of divine consciousness. Teilhard de Chardin refers to this as the Omega point, and Sri Aurobindo as the supermind. Teilhard, who was a Jesuit paleontologist who played an important role in the discovery of Peking man, presented a teleological view of planetary and cosmic evolution, according to which the formation of atoms, molecules, and inanimate matter is followed by the development of the biosphere and organic evolution. Then the appearance of man and the noosphere is the total envelope of human thought. According to Teilhard, evolution does not cease here, but continues on to its culmination and unification in the Omega point, which he identifies with Christ. New Age thought is strongly syncretic. A common theme is the evolution or the transcendence of the human or collective planetary consciousness in a higher state or higher vibratory, a metaphor taken from Georgieff level. David Spangler's communications speak of a new heaven and a new earth, while Christopher Hill's refers, perhaps influenced by Sri Aurobindo, to the divinization of man. Jonathan Livingston Seagull narrated the idea of evolution in a fascinating fashion. James Redfield, in his novel The Celestine Prophecy, suggested that through experiencing a series of personal spiritual insights, humanity is becoming aware of the connection between our evolution and the divine. More recently, in his book God and the Evolving Universe, The Next Step in Personal Evolution, 2002, co-written with Michael Murphy, he claims that humanity is on the verge of undergoing a change in consciousness. It is also known as the path of ascension. Stage theory. The idea of a spiritual evolution finds contemporary expression in a number of stage theories, inspired by Sri Aurobindo, Jean Gebser, and Piaget, among others. In these models, human development, both individual and collectively, is conceptualized as going through a number of structural stages, from the primitive psychophysical genesis to the full-grown rational, cognitive, and moral abilities, and beyond to transpersonal stages in which unconscious drives are fully recognized and integrated, and the sense of a separate identity is loosened or abandoned. Jean Gebser, Spiral Dynamics, an interpretation of social and psychological development that could also be considered a theory of spiritual evolution, is spiral dynamics, based on the work of Claire W. Graves. Spiral dynamics posits a series of stages through which humans' cultural development progresses from a survival-based hunter-gatherer stage to a magical tribal agrarian stage, to a city-building invading stage, to a mythic religious empire stage, to a rational scientific capitalist stage, to a green holistic inclusive stage, and then ascending to a second tier where all the previous stages are contemplated and integrated in a third transpersonal tier where a spiritual unity or omega point is eventually reached, which all the other stages are struggling to embody. He feels that individuals in each of the meme plexus/stages can ascend to the peak of consciousness. These being the prophets, visionaries, and leaders of any region/age. Ken Wilber. More recently, the concept of spiritual evolution has been given a sort of respectability it has not had since the early 19th century through the work of the integral theorist Ken Wilber, in whose writings both the cosmological and the personal dimensions are described. In this integral philosophy, inspired in part by the works of Plotinus, Hegel, Sri Aurobindo, Eric Jansch, and many others, reality is said to consist of several realms or stages, including more than one of the following: the physical, the vital, the psychic, after the Greek psyche, soul, the causal, referring to that which causes or gives rise to the manifest world, and the ultimate, or non-dual, through which the individual progressively evolves. Although this schema is derived in large part from Tibetan Buddhism, Wilber argues and uses many tables of diagrams to show that these same levels of being are common to all wisdom teachings. Described simplistically, Wilber sees humans developing through several stages, including magic, mythic, pluralistic, and holistic mentalities. But he also sees cultures as developing through these stages. And, much like Hegel, he sees this development of individuals and cultures as the evolution of existence itself. Wilber has also teamed up with Don Beck to integrate spiral dynamics into his own integral philosophy, and vice versa. A mystical or religious experience, also known as a spiritual experience or sacred experience, is a subjective experience which is interpreted within a religious framework. In a strict sense, mystical experience refers specifically to an ecstatic unit of experience or non-duality of self and other objects, but more broadly may also refer to non-sensual or unconceptualized sensory awareness or insight, while religious experience may refer to any experience relevant in a religious context. Mysticism entails religious traditions of human transformation aided by various practices and religious experiences. The concept of mystical or religious experience developed in the 19th century as a defense against the growing rationalism of Western society. William James popularized the notion of distinct religious or mystical experiences note in his Varieties of Religious Experience, and influenced the understanding of mysticism as a distinctive experience which supplies knowledge of the transcendental. The interpretation of mystical experiences is a matter of debate. According to William James, mystical experiences have four defining qualities, namely ineffability, noetic quality, transiency, and passivity. According to Otto, the broader category of numinous experiences have two qualities, namely mysterium tremendum, which is the tendency to invoke fear and trembling, and mysterium fascinans, the tendency to attract, fascinate, and compel. Perennialists like William James and Aldous Huxley regard mystical experiences to share a common core, pointing to one universal transcendental reality, for which those experiences offer the proof. R. C. Zahner, 1913 to 1974, rejected the perennialist position, instead discerning three fundamental types of mysticism following Dasgupta, namely theistic, monistic, and panenhenic, all in one, or natural mysticism. Walter Terence Stace criticized Zahner, instead postulating two types following Otto, namely extrovert, unity and diversity, and introverted, pure consciousness, mysticism. The perennial position is largely dismissed by scholars, but has lost none of its popularity. Instead, a constructionist approach became dominant during the 1970s, which also rejects the neat typologies of Zahner and Stace, and states that mystical experiences are mediated by pre-existing frames of reference, while the attribution approach focuses on the religious, meaning that is attributed to specific events. Correlates between mystical experiences and neurological activity have been established, pointing to the temporal lobe as the main locus for these experiences, while Andrew B. Newberg and Eugene G. Dakili have also pointed to the parietal lobe. Recent research points to the relevance of the default mode network, while the anterior insula seems to play a role in the ineffability, subjective certainty induced by mystical experiences. Terminology: mystical or religious experience. The terms mystical experience, religious experience, spiritual experience, and sacred experience have become synonyms, all referring to non-ordinary, numinous, subjective experiences which are typically interpreted in a religious framework. Mystical experience may specifically refers to unitive or non-dual experiences, but may also more broadly refer to non-sensual or unconceptualized sensory awareness or insight, while religious experience may refer to any experience relevant in a religious context. Jones and Gelman note that few classical mystics refer to their experiences as the union of two realities. There is no literal merging or absorption of one reality into another resulting in only one entity. According to them, a more inclusive definition of mystical experience is a purportedly non-sensory awareness or non-structured sensory experience granting acquaintance of realities or states of affairs that are of a kind not accessible by way of ordinary sense perception structured by mental conceptions, somatosensory modalities, or standard introspection. Experiences like visions, near-death experiences, and parapsychological phenomena are excluded from this definition of mystical experience, but may be regarded as religious experiences. Mysticism. Mysticism as a historical religious tradition relates primarily to Christian mysticism and involves more than mystical experience. According to Gelman, the ultimate goal of mysticism is human transformation, not just experiencing mystical or visionary states. According to McGinn, personal transformation is the essential criterion to determine the authenticity of Christian mysticism. Gelman notes that the so-called mystical experience is not a transitional event, as William James claimed, but an abiding consciousness accompanying a person throughout the day or parts of it. For that reason, it might be better to speak of mystical consciousness, which can be either fleeting or abiding. Parsons stresses the importance of distinguishing between temporary experiences and mysticism as a process, which is embodied within a religious matrix of texts and practices. Richard Jones does the same. Related terms: ecstasy, trance and ecstasy. The believer is understood to have a soul or spirit which can leave the body. In ecstasy, the focus is on the soul leaving the body and to experience transcendental realities. This type of religious experience is characteristic for the shaman. Enthusiasm. In enthusiasm or possession, God is understood to be outside, other than or beyond the believer. A sacred power, being or will enters the body or mind of an individual and possesses it. A person capable of being possessed is sometimes called a medium. The deity, spirit, or power uses such a person to communicate to the immanent world. Lewis argues that ecstasy and possession are basically one and the same experience, ecstasy being merely one form which possession may take. The outward manifestation of the phenomenon is the same in that shamans appear to be possessed by spirits, act as their mediums, and even though they claim to have mastery over them, can lose that mastery. Spiritual awakening. A spiritual awakening usually involves a realization or opening to a sacred dimension of reality and may be a religious experience. Often a spiritual awakening has lasting effects upon one's life. It may refer to any of a wide range of experiences, including being born again, near-death experiences, liberation, moksha, and enlightenment bodhi. Dan Merker makes a distinction between trance states and reverie states. According to Merker, in trance states, the normal functions of consciousness are temporarily inhibited, and trance experiences are not filtered by ordinary judgments, and seem to be real and true. In reverie states, numinous experiences are also not inhibited by the normal functions of consciousness, but visions and insights are still perceived as being in need of interpretation, while trance states may lead to a denial of physical reality. Experience as a hermeneutic category. The concept of mystical or religious experience. The concept of mystical or religious experience originated in the 19th century as a defense against the growing rationalism of Western society. Wayne Proudfoot traces the roots of the notion of religious experience to the German theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher, 1768 to 1834, who argued that religion is based on a feeling of the infinite. The notion of religious experience was used by Schleiermacher to defend religion against the growing scientific and secular critique. It was adopted by many scholars of religion, of which William James was the most influential. The origins of the use of this term can also be dated further back. In the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, several historical figures put forth very influential views that religion and its beliefs can be grounded in experience itself. While Kant held that moral experience justified religious beliefs, John Wesley, in addition to stressing individual moral exertion, thought that the religious experiences in the Methodist movement, paralleling the Romantic movement, were foundational to religious commitment as a way of life. William James popularized the notion of mystical experience in his The Varieties of Religious Experience. James wrote, "In mystic states, we both become one with the absolute, and we become aware of our oneness. This is the everlasting and triumphant mystical tradition, hardly altered by differences of clime or creed. In Hinduism, in Neoplatonism, in Sufism, in Christian mysticism, in Whitmanism, we find the same recurring note, so that there is about mystical utterances an eternal unanimity which ought to make a critic stop and think, and which bring it about that the mystical classics have, as has been said, neither birthday nor native land." This book is the classic study on religious or mystical experience, which influenced deeply both the academic and popular understanding of religious experience. James popularized the use of the term religious experience in his Varieties and influenced the understanding of mysticism as a distinctive experience which supplies knowledge of the transcendental. Under the influence of William James, the Varieties of Religious Experience, heavily centered on people's conversion experiences, most philosophers' interest in mysticism has been in distinctive, allegedly knowledge-granting mystical experiences. Other scholars and writers of the 19th and 20th centuries also began their studies on the historical and psychological descriptive analysis of the mystical experience by investigating examples and categorizing it into types. Early notable examples include the study of the term cosmic consciousness by Edward Carpenter, 1892, and psychiatrist Richard Buck in his book Cosmic Consciousness, 1901. The definition of oceanic feeling by Romain Rolland, 1927, and its study by Freud, Rudolf Otto's description of the numinous, 1917, and its studies by Jung, Friedrich von Hegel in The Mystical Element of Religion, 1908, Evelyn Underhill in her work Mysticism, 1911, Aldous Huxley in The Perennial Philosophy, 1945. Influence. The concept of mystical experience has influenced the understanding of specific subjective experiences as a distinctive experiences which supply knowledge of a transcendental reality, cosmic unity, or ultimate truths. A broad range of Western and Eastern movements have incorporated and influenced the emergence of the modern notion of mystical experience, such as the perennial philosophy, transcendentalism, universalism, the Theosophical Society, New Thought, Neo-Vedanta, and Buddhist modernism. Perennial philosophy. According to the perennial philosophy, the mystical experiences in all religions are essentially the same. It supposes that many, if not all of the world's great religions, have arisen around the teachings of mystics, including Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, and Krishna. It also sees most religious traditions describing fundamental mystical experience, at least esoterically. A major proponent in the 20th century was Aldous Huxley, who was heavily influenced in his description by Vivekananda's Neo-Vedanta and the idiosyncratic version of Zen exported to the West by D.T. Suzuki. Both of these thinkers expounded their versions of the perennialist thesis, which they originally received from Western thinkers and theologians. Transcendentalism and Unitarian Universalism. Transcendentalism was an early 19th century liberal Protestant movement, which was rooted in English and German Romanticism, the biblical criticism of Herder and Schleiermacher, and the skepticism of Hume. The Transcendentalists emphasized an intuitive, experiential approach of religion. Following Schleiermacher, an individual's intuition of truth was taken as the criterion for truth. In the late 18th and early 19th century, the first translations of Hindu texts appeared, which were also read by the Transcendentalists and influenced their thinking. They also endorsed Universalist and Unitarianist ideas, leading to Unitarian Universalism, the idea that there must be truth in other religions as well, since a loving God would redeem all living beings, not just Christians. Theosophical Society. The Theosophical Society was formed in 1875 by Helena Blavatsky, Henry Steele Olcott, William Quan Judge, and others to advance the spiritual principles and search for truth, known as theosophy. The Theosophical Society has been highly influential in promoting interest, both in West and East, in a great variety of religious teachings. No single organization or movement has contributed so many components to the New Age movement as the Theosophical Society. It has been the major force in the dissemination of occult literature in the West in the 20th century. The Theosophical Society searched for secret teachings in Asian religions. It has been influential on modernist streams in several Asian religions, notably Hindu reform movements, the revival of Theravada Buddhism, and D.T. Suzuki, who popularized the idea of enlightenment as insight into a timeless, transcendent reality. Another example can be seen in Paul Brunton's A Search in Secret India, which introduced Ramana Maharshi to a Western audience. Orientalism and the Pizza Effect. The interplay between Western and Eastern notions of religion is an important factor in the development of modern mysticism. In the 19th century, when Asian countries were colonialized by Western states, a process of cultural mimesis began. In this process, Western ideas about religion, especially the notion of religious experience, were introduced to Asian countries by missionaries, scholars, and the Theosophical Society, and amalgamated in a new understanding of the Indian and Buddhist traditions. This amalgam was exported back to the West as authentic Asian traditions and acquired a great popularity in the West. Due to this Western popularity, it also gained authority back in India, Sri Lanka, and Japan. The best-known representatives of this amalgamated tradition are Annie Besant, Theosophical Society, Swami Vivekananda, and Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, Neo-Vedanta, Anagurka Dharmapala, a 19th century Sri Lankan Buddhist activist who founded the Maha Bodhi Society, and D.T. Suzuki, a Japanese scholar and Zen Buddhist. A synonymous term for this broad understanding is non-dualism. This mutual influence is also known as the Pizza Effect, criticism of the notion of experience as insufficient for worldwide viewpoints. The notion of experience, however, has been criticized in religious studies today. Robert Sharf points out that experience is a typical Western term, which has found its way into Asian religiosity via Western influences. The notion of experience introduces a false notion of duality between experiencer and experienced, whereas the essence of Kensho is the realization of the non-duality of observer and observed. Pure experience does not exist. All experience is mediated by intellectual and cognitive activity. The specific teachings and practices of a specific tradition may even determine what experience someone has, which means that this experience is not the proof of the teaching, but a result of the teaching. A pure consciousness without concepts, reached by cleaning the doors of perception, would be an overwhelming chaos of sensory input without coherence. Constructivists, such as Stephen Katz, reject any typology of experiences since each mystical experience is deemed unique. Other critics point out that the stress on experience is accompanied with favoring the atomic individual instead of the shared life of the community. It also fails to distinguish between episodic experience and mysticism as a process that is embedded in a total religious matrix of liturgy, scripture, worship, virtues, theology, rituals, and practices. Richard King also points to disjunction between mystical experience and social justice. The privatization of mysticism, that is, the increasing tendency to locate the mystical in the psychological realm of personal experiences, serves to exclude it from political issues as social justice. Mysticism thus becomes seen as a personal matter of cultivating inner states of tranquility and equanimity, which, rather than seeking to transform the world, serve to accommodate the individual to the status quo through the alleviation of anxiety and stress. The American scholar of religion and philosopher of social science Jason Josephson Storm has also critiqued the definition and category of religious experience, especially when such experiences are used to define religion. He compares the appeal to experience to define religion to failed attempts to defend an essentialist definition of art by appeal to aesthetic experience, and implies that each category lacks a common psychological feature across all such experiences by which they may be defined. William James, Mystical and Religious Experience. James emphasized the personal experience of individuals and describes a broad variety of such experiences in the varieties of religious experience. He considered the personal religion to be more fundamental than either theology or ecclesiasticism, and defines religion as the feelings, acts, and experiences of individual men in their solitude, so far as they apprehend themselves to stand in relation to whatever they may consider the divine. According to James, mystical experiences have 4 defining qualities. Ineffability. According to James, the mystical experience defies expression, that no adequate report of its content can be given in words. Noetic quality. Mystics stress that their experiences give them insight into depths of truth unplumbed by the discursive intellect. James referred to this as the noetic or intellectual quality of the mystical. Transiency. James notes that most mystical experiences have a short occurrence, but their effect persists. Passivity. According to James, mystics come to their peak experience not as active seekers, but as passive recipients. James recognized the broad variety of mystical schools and conflicting doctrines both within and between religions. Nevertheless, he shared with thinkers of his era the conviction that beneath the variety could be carved out a certain mystical unanimity, that mystics shared certain common perceptions of the divine, however different their religion or historical epoch. According to Jesuit scholar William Harmless, for James there was nothing inherently theological in or about mystical experience, and felt it legitimate to separate the mystic's experience from theological claims. Harmless notes that James denies the most central fact of religion, namely that religion is practiced by people in groups and often in public. He also ignores ritual, the historicity of religious traditions, and theology, instead emphasizing feeling as central to religion. Rudolf Otto. The German philosopher and theologian Rudolf Otto, 1869 to 1937, argues that there is one common factor to all religious experience, independent of the cultural background. In his book, The Idea of the Holy, 1923, he identifies this factor as the numinous. The numinous experience has 2 aspects: mysterium tremendum, which is the tendency to invoke fear and trembling; mysterium fascinans, the tendency to attract, fascinate, and compel. The numinous experience also has a personal quality to it, in that the person feels to be in communion with a holy other. Otto sees the numinous as the only possible religious experience. He states, There is no religion in which the numinous does not live as the real innermost core, and without it no religion would be worthy of the name. Otto does not take any other kind of religious experience, such as ecstasy and enthusiasm, seriously, and is of the opinion that they belong to the vestibule of religion. Mystical experience. R. C. Zehner theistic, monistic, and panenhenic mystical experience. R. C. Zehner, 1913 to 1974, distinguishes between three fundamental types of mysticism, namely theistic, monistic, and panenhenic, all in one, or natural mysticism, frowny face 9. Theistic mystical experience includes most forms of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic mysticism, and occasional Hindu examples, such as Ramanuj and the Bhagavad Gita. Monistic mystical experience, the experience of the unity of one's soul in isolation, Kevala, from the material and psychic world, includes early Buddhism and Hindu schools such as Samkhya, Yoga, and Advaita Vedanta. Panenhenic mystical experience refers to an experience of nature in all things or of all things as being one, and includes, for instance, Zen Buddhism, Taoism, much Upanishadic thought, as well as American transcendentalism. Within the monistic mystical experience, Zehner draws a clear distinction between the dualist isolationist ideal of Samkhya, the historical Buddha, and various Gnostic sects, and the non-dualist position of Advaita Vedanta. According to the former, the union of an individual spiritual monad, soul, and body is an unnatural state of affairs, and salvation consists in returning to one's own natural, splendid isolation, in which one contemplates oneself forever in timeless bliss. Zehner considers theistic mysticism to be superior to the other two categories because of its appreciation of God, but also because of its strong moral imperative. Zehner is directly opposing the views of Aldous Huxley. Natural mystical experiences are, in Zehner's view, of less value because they do not lead as directly to the virtues of charity and compassion. Zehner is generally critical of what he sees as narcissistic tendencies in nature mysticism. Zehner has been criticized by Payton for the theological violence which his approach does to non-theistic traditions, forcing them into a framework which privileges Zehner's own liberal Catholicism. Walter T. states extrovertive and introvertive mysticism. Zehner has also been criticized by Walter Terence Stace in his book Mysticism and Philosophy, 1960, on similar grounds. Stace argues that doctrinal differences between religious traditions are inappropriate criteria when making cross-cultural comparisons of mystical, unitive experiences. Stace argues that mysticism is part of the process of perception, not interpretation. That is to say that the unity of mystical experiences is perceived and only afterwards interpreted according to the perceiver's background. This may result in different accounts of the same phenomenon. While an atheist describes the unity as freed from empirical filling, a religious person might describe it as God or the divine. In mysticism and philosophy, one of Stace's key questions is whether there are a set of common characteristics to all mystical experiences. Based on the study of religious texts, which he took as phenomenological descriptions of personal experiences, and excluding occult phenomena, visions, and voices, Stace distinguished two types of mystical experience, namely extrovertive and introvertive mysticism. He describes extrovertive mysticism as an experience of unity within the world, whereas introvertive mysticism is an experience of unity devoid of perceptual objects. It is literally an experience of no-thingness. The unity in extrovertive mysticism is with the totality of objects of perception. While perception stays continuous, unity shines through the same world. The unity in introvertive mysticism is with a pure consciousness, devoid of objects of perception, pure unitary consciousness, where an awareness of the world and of multiplicity is completely obliterated. According to Stace, such experiences are nonsensical and non-intellectual, under a total suppression of the whole empirical content. Characteristics of extrovertive and introvertive mystical experiences, as in Stace, 1960. Stace finally argues that there is a set of 7 common characteristics for each type of mystical experience, with many of them overlapping between the two types. Stace furthermore argues that extrovertive mystical experiences are on a lower level than introverted mystical experiences. Stace's categories of introverted mysticism and extroverted mysticism are derived from Rudolf Otto's mysticism of introspection and unifying vision. William Wainwright distinguishes 4 different kinds of extrovert mystical experience and 2 kinds of introvert mystical experience. Extrovert, experiencing the unity of nature, experiencing nature as a living presence, experiencing all nature phenomena as part of an eternal now, the unconstructed experience of Buddhism. Introvert, pure empty consciousness, the mutual love of theistic experiences. Richard Jones, following William Wainwright, elaborated on the distinction, showing different types of experiences in each category. Extrovertive experiences, the sense of connectedness, unity, of oneself with nature, with a loss of a sense of boundaries within nature. The luminous glow to nature of nature mysticism, the presence of God immanent in nature outside of time, shining through nature of cosmic consciousness, the lack of separate, self-existing entities of mindfulness states. Introvertive experiences, theistic experiences of connectedness or identity with God in mutual love. Non-personal differentiated experiences, the depth mystical experience empty of all differentiable content. Following Stace's lead, Ralph Hood developed the mysticism scale. According to Hood, the introvertive mystical experience may be a common core to mysticism independent of both culture and person, forming the basis of a perennial psychology. According to Hood, the perennialist view has strong empirical support, since his scale yielded positive results across various cultures, stating that mystical experience as operationalized from Stace's criteria is identical across various samples. Although Stace's work on mysticism received a positive response, it has also been strongly criticized in the 1970s and 1980s for its lack of methodological rigor and its perennialist pre-assumptions. Major criticisms came from Stephen T. Katz in his influential series of publications on mysticism and philosophy, and from Wayne Proudfoot in his Religious Experience, 1985. Masson and Masson criticized Stace for using a buried premise, namely that mysticism can provide valid knowledge of the world, equal to science and logic. A similar criticism has been voiced by Jacob van Belzen toward Hood, noting that Hood validated the existence of a common core in mystical experiences, but based on a test which presupposes the existence of such a common core, noting that the instrument used to verify Stace's conceptualization of Stace is not independent of Stace, but based on him. Belzen also notes that religion does not stand on its own, but is embedded in a cultural context, which should be taken into account. To this criticism, Hood et al. Answer that universalistic tendencies in religious research are rooted first in inductive generalizations from cross-cultural consideration of either faith or mysticism, stating that Stace sought out texts which he recognized as an expression of mystical expression, from which he created his universal core. Hood therefore concludes that Belzen is incorrect when he claims that items were presupposed. Religious experiences. Norman Habel, mediated and immediate. Biblical scholar Norman Habel defines religious experiences as the structured way in which a believer enters into a relationship with, or gains an awareness of, the sacred within the context of a particular religious tradition. Religious experiences are by their very nature preternatural, that is, out of the ordinary or beyond the natural order of things. They may be difficult to distinguish observationally from psychopathological states, such as psychoses or other forms of altered awareness. Not all preternatural experiences are considered to be religious experiences. Following Hebel's definition, psychopathological states or drug-induced states of awareness are not considered to be religious experiences because they are mostly not performed within the context of a particular religious tradition. Moore and Hebel identify two classes of religious experiences: the immediate and the mediated religious experience. Mediated. In the mediated experience, the believer experiences the sacred through mediators such as rituals, special persons, religious groups, totemic objects, or the natural world. Immediate. The immediate experience comes to the believer without any intervening agency or mediator. The deity or divine is experienced directly. Richard Swinburne, public or private. In his book Faith and Reason, the philosopher Richard Swinburne formulated 5 categories into which all religious experiences fall. Public, a believer sees God's hand at work, whereas other explanations are possible, e.g., looking at a beautiful sunset. Public, an unusual event that breaches natural law, e.g., walking on water. Private, describable using normal language, e.g., Jacob's vision of a ladder. Private, indescribable using normal language. Usually a mystical experience, e.g., white did not cease to be white, nor black cease to be black, but black became white and white became black. Private, a non-specific, general feeling of God working in one's life. Swinburne also suggested 2 principles for the assessment of religious experiences. Principle of credulity, with the absence of any reason to disbelieve it. One should accept what appears to be true, e.g., if one sees someone walking on water, one should believe that it is occurring. Principle of testimony, with the absence of any reason to disbelieve them. One should accept that eyewitnesses or believers are telling the truth when they testify about religious experiences. Interpretation, perennialism, constructionism, and contextualism. Perennialism. Scholarly research on mystical experiences in the 19th and 20th century was dominated by a discourse on mystical experience, laying sole emphasis on the experiential aspect, be it spontaneous or induced by human behavior. Perennialists regard those various experiences traditions as pointing to one universal, transcendental reality, for which those experiences offer the proof. In this approach, mystical experiences are privatized, separated from the context in which they emerge. William James, in his The Varieties of Religious Experience, was highly influential in further popularizing this perennial approach and a notion of personal experience as a validation of religious truths. The essentialist model argues that mystical experience is independent of the socio-cultural, historical, and religious context in which it occurs, and regards all mystical experience in its essence to be the same. According to this common core thesis, different descriptions can mask quite similar, if not identical, experiences. People can differentiate experience from interpretation, such that different interpretations may be applied to otherwise identical experiences. Principal exponents of the perennialist position were William James, Walter Terence Stace, who distinguishes extroverted and introverted mysticism in response to R. C. Zahner's distinction between theistic and monistic mysticism, Houston Smith and Ralph W. Hood, who conducted empirical research using the mysticism scale, which is based on Stace's model. The perennial position is largely dismissed by scholars, but has lost none of its popularity. The contextual approach has become the common approach and takes into account the historical and cultural context of mystical experiences. Stephen Katz, Constructionism. After Walter Stace's seminal book in 1960, the general philosophy of mysticism received little attention, but in the 1970s, the issue of a universal perennialism versus each mystical experience being was reignited by Stephen Katz. In an often cited quote, he states, "There are no pure, i.e. unmediated, experiences. Neither mystical experience nor more ordinary forms of experience give any indication or any ground for believing that they are unmediated. The notion of unmediated experience seems, if not self-contradictory, at best empty. This epistemological fact seems to me to be true because of the sort of beings we are, even with regard to the experiences of those ultimate objects of concern with which mystics have had intercourse, e.g., God, being, nirvana, etc. Social constructionism argues that mystical experiences are a family of similar experiences that includes many different kinds, as represented by the many kinds of religious and secular mystical reports. The constructionist states that mystical experiences are fully constructed by the ideas, symbols, and practices that mystics are familiar with, shaped by the concepts, which the mystic brings to, and which shape his experience. What is being experienced is being determined by the expectations and the conceptual background of the mystic. Critics of the Common Core thesis argue that no unmediated experience is possible, and that in the extreme, language is not simply used to interpret experience, but in fact constitutes experience. The principal exponent of the constructionist position is Stephen T. Katz, who, in a series of publications, has made a highly influential and compelling case for the constructionist approach. According to Katz, 1978, Stay's typology is too reductive and inflexible, reducing the complexities and varieties of mystical experience into improper categories. According to Katz, Stace does not notice the difference between experience and interpretation, but fails to notice the epistemological issues involved in recognizing such experiences as mystical, and the even more fundamental issue of which conceptual framework precedes and shapes these experiences. Katz further notes that Stace supposes that similarities in descriptive language also implies a similarity in experience, an assumption which Katz rejects. According to Katz, close examination of the descriptions and their context reveals that those experiences are not identical. Katz further notes that Stace held one specific mystical tradition to be superior and normative, whereas Katz rejects reductionist notions and leaves God as God and nirvana as nirvana. According to Payton, Katz rejects the discrimination between experiences and their interpretations. Katz argues that it is not the description, but the experience itself, which is conditioned by the cultural and religious background of the mystic. According to Katz, it is not possible to have pure or unmediated experience. Yet, according to Labelman, Katz did not say that the experience cannot be unmediated. He said that the conceptual understanding of the experience cannot be unmediated and is based on culturally mediated preconceptions. According to Labelman, misunderstanding Katz's argument has led some to defend the authenticity of pure consciousness events, while this is not the issue. Labelman further notes that a mystic's interpretation is not necessarily more true or correct than the interpretation of an uninvolved observer. Robert Foreman, pure consciousness event. Robert Foreman has criticized Katz's approach, arguing that lay people who describe mystical experiences often notice that this experience involves a totally new form of awareness, which cannot be described in their existing frame of reference. Newberg argued that there is neurological evidence for the existence of a pure consciousness event empty of any constructionist structuring. Richard Jones, constructivism, anti-constructivism, and perennialism. Richard H. Jones believes that the dispute between constructionism and perennialism is ill-formed. He draws a distinction between anti-constructivism and perennialism. Constructivism could be rejected with respect to a certain class of mystical experiences without ascribing to a perennialist philosophy on the relation of mystical doctrines. Constructivism versus anti-constructivism is a matter of the nature of mystical experiences themselves, while perennialism is a matter of mystical traditions and the doctrines they espouse. One can reject constructivism about the nature of mystical experiences without claiming that all mystical experiences reveal a cross-cultural perennial truth. Anti-constructivists can advocate contextualism as much as constructivists do, while perennialists reject the need to study mystical experiences in the context of a mystic's culture, since all mystics state the same universal truth. Contextualism and attribution theory. The theoretical study of mystical experience has shifted from an experiential, privatized, and perennialist approach to a contextual and empirical approach. 84. The contextual approach, which also includes constructionism and attribution theory, takes into account the historical and cultural context. Neurological research takes an empirical approach, relating mystical experiences to neurological processes. Wayne Proudfoot proposes an approach that also negates any alleged cognitive content of mystical experiences. Mystics unconsciously merely attribute a doctrinal content to ordinary experiences. That is, mystics project cognitive content onto otherwise ordinary experiences, having a strong emotional impact. Objections have been raised concerning Proudfoot's use of the psychological data. This approach, however, has been further elaborated by Taves. She incorporates both neurological and cultural approaches in the study of mystical experience. Many religious and mystical traditions see religious experiences, particularly that knowledge that comes with them, as revelations caused by divine agency rather than ordinary natural processes. They are considered real encounters with God or gods, or real contact with higher-order realities of which humans are not ordinarily aware. Inducement and development. Mystical traditions offer the means to induce mystical experiences, which may have several origins. Spontaneous, either apparently without any cause, or by persistent existential concerns. Neurophysiological origins. These are studied in the field of neurotheology and the cognitive science of religion and include near-death experiences. Causes may be temporal lobe epilepsy, as described in the Gershwin syndrome, stroke, profound depression, or schizophrenia. Religious practices such as contemplation, meditation, questioning, or investigating self, representations/cognitive schemata, such as self-inquiry, Poitou practice, and Douglas Harding's on having no head. Mantra repetition, prayer, dance such as Sufi whirling, and lucid dreaming. Entheogens, drugs. Most mystical traditions warn against an attachment to mystical experiences and offer a protective and hermeneutic framework to accommodate these experiences. Empirical studies. The empirical study of mysticism today focuses on two topics: identifying the neurological correlates of mystical experiences and demonstrating the purported benefits of meditation. Correlates between mystical experiences and neurological activity have been established, pointing to the temporal lobe as the main locus for these experiences, while Andrew B. Newberg and Eugene G. D'Aquila have also pointed to the parietal lobe. Recent research points to the relevance of the default mode network and the anterior insula, which may be related to the experience of ineffability, the subjective sense of certainty induced by mystical experiences. Neuroscience. Early studies in the 1950s and 1960s attempted to use EEGs to study brain wave patterns correlated with spiritual states. During the 1980s, Dr. Michael Persinger stimulated the temporal lobes of human subjects with a weak magnetic field. His subjects claimed to have a sensation of an ethereal presence in the room. Some current studies use neuroimaging to localize brain regions active or differentially active during religious experiences. These neuroimaging studies have implicated a number of brain regions, including the limbic system, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, superior parietal lobe, and caudate nucleus. Based on the complex nature of religious experience, it is likely that they are mediated by an interaction of neural mechanisms that all add a small piece to the overall experience. Neuroscience of religion, also known as neurotheology, biotheology, or spiritual neuroscience, is the study of correlations of neural phenomena with subjective experiences of spirituality and hypotheses to explain these phenomena. Proponents of neurotheology claim that there is a neurological and evolutionary basis for subjective experiences traditionally categorized as spiritual or religious. The neuroscience of religion takes neural correlates as the basis of cognitive functions and religious experiences. These religious experiences are thereby emergent properties of neural correlates. This approach does not necessitate exclusion of the self, but interprets the self as influenced or otherwise acted upon by underlying neural mechanisms. Proponents argue that religious experience can be evoked through stimulus of specific brain regions or can be observed through measuring increase in activity of specific brain regions. According to the neurotheologist Andrew B. Newberg and two colleagues, neurological processes which are driven by the repetitive, rhythmic stimulation, which is typical of human ritual, and which contribute to the delivery of transcendental feelings of connection to a universal unity. They posit, however, that physical stimulation alone is not sufficient to generate transcendental unitive experiences. For this to occur, they say there must be a blending of the rhythmic stimulation with ideas. Once this occurs, ritual turns a meaningful idea into a visceral experience. Moreover, they say that humans are compelled to act out myths by the biological operations of the brain due to what they call the inbuilt tendency of the brain to turn thoughts into actions. An alternate approach is influenced by personalism and exists contraparallel to the reductionist approach. It focuses on the self as the object of interest, the same object of interest as in religion. According to Patrick McNamara, a proponent of personalism, the self is a neural entity that controls rather than consists of the cognitive functions being processed in brain regions. A biological basis for religious experience may exist. References to the supernatural or mythical beings first appeared approximately 40,000 years ago. A popular theory posits that dopaminergic brain systems are the evolutionary basis for human intellect and, more specifically, abstract reasoning. The capacity for religious thought arises from the capability to employ abstract reasoning. There is no evidence to support the theory that abstract reasoning, generally or with regard to religious thought, evolved independent of the dopaminergic axis. Religious behavior has been linked to extrapersonal brain systems that predominate the ventromedial cortex and rely heavily on dopaminergic transmission. A biphasic effect exists with regard to activation of the dopaminergic axis or ventromedial cortex. While mild activation can evoke a perceived understanding of the supernatural, extreme activation can lead to delusions characteristic of psychosis. Stress can cause the depletion of 5-hydroxytryptamine, also referred to as serotonin. The ventromedial 5-HT axis is involved in peripersonal activities such as emotional arousal, social skills, and visual feedback. When 5-HT is decreased or depleted, one may become subject to incorrect attributions of self-initiated or internally generated activity, e.g. hallucinations. Temporal lobe. Temporal lobe epilepsy has become a popular field of study due to its correlation to religious experience. Religious experiences and hyperreligiosity are often used to characterize those with temporal lobe epilepsy. Visionary religious experiences and momentary lapses of consciousness may point toward a diagnosis of Gershwin syndrome. More generally, the symptoms are consistent with features of temporal lobe epilepsy, not an uncommon feature in religious icons and mystics. It seems that this phenomenon is not exclusive to TLE, but can manifest in the presence of other epileptic variants as well as mania, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and schizophrenia, conditions characterized by ventromedial dopaminergic dysfunction. The temporal lobe generates the feeling of I and gives a feeling of familiarity or strangeness to the perceptions of the senses. It seems to be involved in mystical experiences and in the change in personality that may result from such experiences. There's a long-standing notion that epilepsy and religion are linked. 158. and some religious figures may have had temporal lobe epilepsy, TLE. Raymond Buck's book Cosmic Consciousness, 1901, contains several case studies of persons who have realized cosmic consciousness. Several of these cases are also being mentioned in J. E. Bryant's 1953 book, Genius and Epilepsy, which has a list of more than 20 people that combines the great and the mystical. James Luba's The Psychology of Religious Mysticism noted that among the dread diseases that afflict humanity, there's only one that interests us quite particularly. That disease is epilepsy. Slater and Beard renewed the interest in TLE and religious experience in the 1960s. Deworst and Beard, 1970, described 6 cases of TLE patients who underwent sudden religious conversions. They placed these cases in the context of several Western saints with a sudden conversion, who were or may have been epileptic. Deworst and Beard described several aspects of conversion experiences and did not favor one specific mechanism. Norman Gushwind described behavioral changes related to temporal lobe epilepsy in the 1970s and 1980s. Gushwind described cases which included extreme religiosity, now called Gushwind syndrome, and aspects of the syndrome have been identified in some religious figures, in particular extreme religiosity and hypergraphia, excessive writing. Gushwind introduced this interictal personality disorder to neurology, describing a cluster of specific personality characteristics, which he found characteristic of patients with temporal lobe epilepsy. Critics note that these characteristics can be the result of any illness and are not sufficiently descriptive for patients with temporal lobe epilepsy. Neuropsychiatrist Peter Fenwick in the 1980s and 1990s also found a relationship between the right temporal lobe and mystical experience, but also found that pathology or brain damage is only one of many possible causal mechanisms for these experiences. He questioned the earlier accounts of religious figures with temporal lobe epilepsy, noticing that very few true examples of the ecstatic aura and the temporal lobe seizure had been reported in the world's scientific literature prior to 1980. According to Fenwick, it is likely that the earlier accounts of temporal lobe epilepsy and temporal lobe pathology and the relation to mystic and religious states owes more to the enthusiasm of their authors than to a true scientific understanding of the nature of temporal lobe functioning. The occurrence of intense religious feelings in epileptic patients in general is rare, with an incident rate of about 2 to 3%. Sudden religious conversion, together with visions, has been documented in only a small number of individuals with temporal lobe epilepsy. The occurrence of religious experiences in TLE patients may as well be explained by religious attribution due to the background of these patients. Nevertheless, the neuroscience of religion is a growing field of research, searching for specific neurological explanations of mystical experiences. Those rare epileptic patients with ecstatic seizures may provide clues for the neurological mechanisms involved in mystical experiences, such as the anterior insular cortex, which is involved in self-awareness and subjective certainty. Anterior insula. A common quality in mystical experiences is ineffability, a strong feeling of certainty which cannot be expressed in words. This ineffability has been threatened with skepticism. According to Arthur Schopenhauer, the inner experience of mysticism is philosophically unconvincing. In The Emotion Machine, Marvin Minsky argues that mystical experiences only seem profound and persuasive because the mind's critical faculties are relatively inactive during them. Gushwind and Picard propose a neurological explanation for this subjective certainty based on clinical research of epilepsy. According to Picard, this feeling of certainty may be caused by a dysfunction of the anterior insula, a part of the brain which is involved in interoception, self-reflection, and in avoiding uncertainty about the internal representations of the world by anticipation of resolution of uncertainty or risk. This avoidance of uncertainty functions through the comparison between predicted states and actual states, that is, signaling that we do not understand, i.e., that there is ambiguity. Picard notes that the concept of insight is very close to that of certainty and refers to Archimedes' eureka. Picard hypothesizes that in ecstatic seizures, the comparison between predicted states and actual states no longer functions, and that mismatches between predicted state and actual state are no longer processed, blocking negative emotions and negative arousal arising from predictive uncertainty, which will be experienced as emotional confidence. Picard concludes that this could lead to a spiritual interpretation in some individuals. Parietal lobe. Andrew B. Newberg and Eugene G. D'Aquila, in their book Why God Won't Go Away, Brain Science and the Biology of Belief, take a perennial stance, describing their insights into the relationship between religious experience and brain function. D'Aquila describes his own meditative experiences as allowing a deeper, simpler part of him to emerge, which he believes to be the truest part of who he is, the part that never changes. Not content with personal and subjective descriptions like these, Newberg and D'Aquila have studied the brain correlates to such experiences. They scan the brain blood flow patterns during such moments of mystical transcendence, using SPECT scans to detect which brain areas show heightened activity. Their scans showed unusual activity in the top rear section of the brain, the posterior superior parietal lobe, or the orientation association area, OA, in their own words. This area creates a consistent cognition of the physical limits of the self. This OAA shows a sharply reduced activity during meditative states, reflecting a block in the incoming flow of sensory information, resulting in a perceived lack of physical boundaries. According to Newberg and D'Aquila, this is exactly how Robert, who, and generations of Eastern mystics before him have described their peak meditative, spiritual, and mystical moments. Newberg and D'Aquila conclude that mystical experience correlates to observable neurological events, which are not outside the range of normal brain function. They also believe that our research has left us no choice but to conclude that the mystics may be onto something, that the mind's machinery of transcendence may in fact be a window through which we can glimpse the ultimate realness of something that is truly divine. Why God Won't Go Away received very little attention from professional scholars of religion. According to Bulkeley, Newberg and D'Aquila seem blissfully unaware of the past half-century of critical scholarship questioning universalistic claims about human nature and experience. Matthew Day also writes that the discovery of a neurological substrate of a religious experience is an isolated finding which doesn't even come close to a robust theory of religion. Default mode network. Recent studies evidence the relevance of the default mode network in spiritual and self-transcending experiences. Its functions are related, among others, to self-reference and self-awareness. And new imaging experiments during meditation and the use of hallucinogens indicate a decrease in the activity of this network mediated by them, leading some studies to base on it a probable neurocognitive mechanism of the dissolution of the self, which occurs in some mystical phenomena. Psychiatry. A 2011 paper suggested that psychiatric conditions associated with psychotic spectrum symptoms may be possible explanations for revelatory-driven experiences and activities such as those of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and St. Paul. It also proposed that the behavior of the followers of these religious figures could be explained through the lens of psychopathology and group dynamics. Psychedelic drugs. A number of studies by Roland R. Griffiths and other researchers have concluded that high doses of psilocybin and other classic psychedelics trigger mystical experiences in most research participants. Mystical experiences have been measured by a number of psychometric scales, including the Hood Mysticism Scale, the Spiritual Transcendence Scale, and the Mystical Experience Questionnaire. The revised version of the Mystical Experience Questionnaire, for example, asked participants about 4 dimensions of their experience, namely the mystical quality, positive mood, such as the experience of amazement, the loss of the usual sense of time and space, and the sense that the experience cannot be adequately conveyed through words. The questions on the mystical quality in turn probe multiple aspects: the sense of pure being, the sense of unity with one's surroundings, the sense that what one experienced was real, and the sense of sacredness. Some researchers have questioned the interpretation of the results from these studies and whether the framework and terminology of mysticism are appropriate in a scientific context, while other researchers have responded to those criticisms and argued that descriptions of mystical experiences are compatible with a scientific worldview. Integrating religious experience, religious traditions, in mystical and contemplative traditions. Mystical experiences are not a goal in themselves, but part of a larger path of self-transformation. For example, the Zen Buddhist training does not end with Kensho, but practice is to be continued to deepen the insight and to express it in daily life. To deepen the initial insight of Kensho, Shikantaza, and koan study are necessary. This trajectory of initial insight followed by a gradual deepening and ripening is expressed by Linji Yishuan in his 3 mysterious gates, the 5 ranks, the 4 ways of knowing of Hakuinen, the 10 ox-herding pictures, which detail the steps on the path. Psychology. Several psychologists have proposed models in which religious experiences are part of a process of transformation of the self. Carl Jung's work on himself and his patients convinced him that life has a spiritual purpose beyond material goals. One's main task, he believed, is to discover and fulfill deep innate potential. Much as the acorn contains the potential to become the oak, or the caterpillar to become the butterfly. Based on his study of Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Gnosticism, Taoism, and other traditions, Jung perceived that this journey of transformation is at the mystical heart of all religions. It is a journey to meet the self and, at the same time, to meet the divine. Unlike Sigmund Freud, Jung thought spiritual experience was essential to well-being. The notion of a numinous was an important concept in the writings of Carl Jung. Jung regarded numinous experiences as fundamental to an understanding of the individuation process because of their association with experiences of synchronicity in which the presence of archetypes is felt. McNamara proposes that religious experiences may help in decentering the self and transform it into an integral self, which is closer to an ideal self. Transpersonal psychology is a school of psychology that studies the transpersonal, self-transcendent, or spiritual aspects of the human experience. The Journal of Transpersonal Psychology describes transpersonal psychology as the study of humanity's highest potential, and with the recognition, understanding, and realization of unitive, spiritual, and transcendent states of consciousness. Issues considered in transpersonal psychology include spiritual self-development, peak experiences, mystical experiences, systemic trance, and other metaphysical experiences of living.
The top of the hill. There were a class of schoolmates running up a hill for their school team running competition. Now, some were large, some slim, some short, and some were athletic. The large at running at the hill had a probability of 10% at reaching the top, the slim 50%, the short 70%, and last but not least the athletic at 90 to 95%, after all the variables and hypotheses had been taken into consideration, calculated, and were written down on the probability chart for the bets to be laid by the teachers and the parents for fun and charity. When asked the question, whether there is a creator, and that all life have souls, and those souls are on a round trip to and from heaven, that the question is asked in the first place, or even thought of and hypothesized, no matter how speculative, it shows that there's a probability that the answer to all 3 questions could be yes, just like that any runner could reach the top of the hill, thus showing that God, souls, and heaven must therefore be inevitable and exist.
The wave. The universe, reality, and life are on a wave of conscious awareness that began at the dawn of creation with its precognition or vision of eternal matter, the alpha, and will end with the self-actualization of spiritual heaven that are brought about as the souls, which are personification of the Creator adorn eternity at the world's demise, but not the earth, the omega. Within infinity our souls are forged with both mind and matter that enter the grand finale as our Creator through us resonates its presence with the vision from its past from dawn to dusk of all creation, as the soul's ultimate journey is to self-actualize spiritual utopia, which is in God's humankind and all of its creation's heart that bear witness to life as they wash upon and stains the shores of all infinity, thus creating eternity and all creation into eternal matter, the land of the souls.